Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast. I'm Catherine Tindall with Dominion. We're a specialty tax and accounting firm focused on serving advisors. And on today's episode, I have with me Shelby Nicholl. She has a 25-year corporate vet turned entrepreneur. She grew up inside the largest broker dealers, Edward Jones, way back when, LPL, and then she now helps advisors with transformations, moving practices, going independent, and starting their own RIAs. So today's conversation, we're really going to focus on advisors who are thinking about making structural changes in the practice, maybe going RIA, the different sides of the ways that you can run your practice. And so I want to welcome you, Shelby, to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to the conversation.
So I feel like you've probably seen everything at this point from your institutional experience to working with people. I know I have so many people reaching out. It seems like a much more recent thing where the going RIA option is becoming more and more enticing to people, especially with the prevalence of, different technology that's available and different people that can help on the compliance side. But have you been seeing similar trends with more firms, eyeing the door?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely think going RIA is very trendy right now. And the accessibility, to your point, is definitely there. I think there's a lot of questions, though, that people have about doing so and things that maybe even hold them back, right? So,
Yep.
Fidelity would even say that some of the things that hold us back are things like even our mindset. Mindset should never be the hindrance. So let's talk about the things that are not mindset related today. Some of the other things that hold people back from sort of the going RIA route is going to be around book readiness, making sure that they have sort of transitioned into that advisory practice, the recurring revenue stream, et cetera. And then there's a whole bunch of things that we can solve too today that maybe we couldn't have a few years ago. And those solves are now much more known in the industry. And so that's creating this new amount of demand for this idea of going independent.
Yeah, that's great. So, for the firms that approach you where they're thinking about it, they're thinking about breaking away, or like an individual who has a book of business is thinking like, okay, I'm ready. I want to see what's on the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
What are some of the first things that they should be thinking about of whether or not this is an attractive option for them? And then also, what's the general framework you have for thinking through the process of, is this a change that you should be making?
Yeah, it's such a great question. So there's a couple things that I always take us back to. And I think about leaving a firm, joining a new firm, joining a new platform, starting my own. I always come back to three key kind of buckets of criteria. What are the functional needs of the practice? So what are your functional needs today? And what are going to be your functional needs in the future? And that might be the types of advisory program, how you want to invest the money, alternatives, annuities, right? What are those functional things that are today part of your practice, and where do you want those functional things to be in the future? Secondly is financials. What are your financials today? And that means actually knowing your number, guys. It's not just knowing your payout percent. It is the actual end of the day number that we want to know. And then also thinking about, what do we want in firms that we are associated with? Do you care if they're PE backed or not, et cetera? So we talk about those financial elements. And then the third element is the personality side. Do you have a philosophical belief in being a fiduciary? Right? You kind of need that if you are going to go RIA. You need to really believe that that is the right way to do business and be committed to it. Also, we look at things like your own spiritual beliefs or your own political beliefs, your own activities and hobbies and things. All of those things can come together to help us understand what's going to make a perfect fit for you. And if that means joining somebody else's platform, or if that means starting your own. Some of the other things, just, off the cuff too, is around the size of your practice today. If you're going to go into making a channel change, and specifically to the RIA channel, and you're thinking about forming your own, you can absolutely do it. Chuck Falo would say you can do it with basically a laptop and that's about it, right? You can do it. You can go XYPN, et cetera. The better probably place, I think, to start is right around when you're above 100 million, because then you can go into SEC registration, and that is a much easier opportunity for you to do your own RIA.
Yeah. And it's funny, I've seen for the firms that we've kind of been a part of this process with them, I've seen that it's roughly like around that size is when a lot of them want to make the change, or they just do it right away because they have the plans to grow. They want the infrastructure. But where are some of the stumbling blocks that you've seen in this process for people? Maybe if we just zoom into that first bucket of, identifying the needs that you'd be replaced, because something that I've observed talking to firms that go RIA is, they get a lot of sticker shock once they realize like how much it actually costs to professionalize all the components of the business that have been previously handled by the broker dealer. And sometimes they think, oh, well, I can get away with not doing this, not doing that. But then when they actually go through that process, they realize like, oh, actually, I might have been getting a little bit of better deal than I thought I was getting, or, for others, it's not as good. But when it comes to the identifying those needs and then bucketing those pieces out, what are some, stumbling blocks or, advice that you have for people just in that kind of component of the journey?
Yeah. So when I'm thinking about those functional needs in particular, is you're right. A lot of those can add up to great sticker shock. Because one of the things that we're going to talk about is what is your tech stack? What is the compliance partner going to look like, et cetera? Also, the custodian choices, too. We have to get those foundational elements right at
Mm-hmm.
the very beginning. And the foundation really is the custodian and it's the compliance partner. Once
Mm-hmm.
those couple of things are set, then we can layer on everything else. But that, to your point, is really where that sticker shock can begin to come in. What I recommend that we do is we start with those foundational elements. And again, we're always keeping a really strict eye on the costs of each of these things. If you're at under 100 million, I really just don't think it makes that much sense for you to run your own RIA. You
Mm-hmm.
can do it, but I don't know that you should do it because of some of that scale issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, even when you're at 100 million or anywhere below that, of course, there are a ton now of what we would call RIA platform companies that
Mm-hmm.
almost operate like the old broker dealers did in your past
Yeah.
life. They provide all those services, they provide the compliance, they might provide marketing support, they provide virtual admin, whatever it might be. And those RIA platforms are incredibly attractive. Often
Mm-hmm.
they're priced pretty well, even compared to the broker dealers,
Yeah.
and they provide so much of that support. And some of them you can even peel off onto your own ADV later. So
Mm-hmm.
you can use them as your first step. It's almost like, the first path in your journey to the big white castle on the hill, right? The first
Yeah.
step was, becoming an advisor. The second step is probably a broker dealer. The third step might be going to an RIA platform. And then you get to the big castle on the hill, and that is your own ADV.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's funny that you say that because we've had a number of these, probably on the smaller side, platforms reach out to us. And that's the whole setup. They're like, we basically built all the infrastructure for us. We're sharing it with other people who want to come on. They can kind of pick and choose what they want to participate in. And it's very, plug and play for them. For people that you've seen who have looked at the RIA option and said no, because for us, I've had a number of people where we've had this, where they were a broker dealer, they were thinking about going RIA, they did the math and realized, you know what, I'm just going to be happier staying broker dealer for this reason or that reason. Have you seen people come to this and make that decision? And, what makes it a no-go for people, in terms of not making the switch for the long term?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was even talking with a client earlier today that is evaluating this exact decision. And in his particular case of, joining an RIA platform or staying with a more broker dealer traditional platform, one of his stumbling blocks is around the idea of having two firms that clients are logging into somehow.
Mm,
So some of it comes into just sort of the client optionality and the
mm,
client opportunity there. What I had to reiterate to him, because in this particular case, I do think that going RIA is probably the right thing for this particular advisor. What we had to talk about was, yeah, but they're going to log in through eMoney and or through Orion, and so from a client standpoint, it's going to be a negligible sort of impact, right?
mhm,
So I think that's one thing that people get hung up on. I think another thing that people get hung up on is truly book readiness and the stories that they might have told in their old days.
mm,
So some of my clients, because I worked for almost a decade at Edward Jones, are former Edward Jones reps. They talked very much kind of in an anti-fee based world. They sold all of these A shares 20 years ago. The client has been paying trails, but hasn't been paying directly to the advisor since.
mm,
Getting those moved over to the fee-based side, totally solvable problem today. You can just share class exchange it, set the fee on that sleeve of securities at a pretty low level, but kind of taking back that revenue from the trails.
Mhm.
Absolutely solvable, but that is a client conversation that you're going to have. And so there's some of those that kind of get in the way of people. And then I think the last piece is just this idea of giving up the 7. There's an
Mm.
emotional connection to, I passed this really hard test. I've had it all my life. I just don't really understand what it means to give it up. And so
Mm.
just that sort of emotional, still pull of tradition, right? We all have a little inertia in us. And so we have to decide to cut that cord, right? It's kind of like in the old days with cable versus streaming.
Mhm.
My in-laws came to me last week and said, "We've cut the cord completely. We're only on streaming now."
Mm.
We cut it 10 years ago, but they just did, right? So it
Yeah, yeah.
just takes people a little bit of extra time.
And in terms of, when you have people that are leaving with, say, a team, that's its own dynamic as well as change
100%.
management with a team. And so for people who are, not a solo operation where they are leaving with a team, maybe they have a junior advisor or two and admin staff, what do they need to be thinking about in terms of managing this decision process and, doing their due diligence in the context of, working with the team? Just a slight interruption in this conversation. I wanted to bring to your attention two things that are important for you to know. So, we're always at the mercy of social media algorithms. So, if you can subscribe to the show, that would mean a lot to me. Even more to me if you can leave a rating and let me know what you think about it. But we have a new newsletter that's coming out. It's going to be very active in 2025 that is specifically around tax issues that I'm seeing advisors face in their own practices, changes in legislations, and the pieces that I think are critically important for you to stay ahead of as an advisor with the new administration. So nearby, wherever you're interacting with this, will be the link of how to sign up for our newsletter. Also nearby will be the link to my LinkedIn, which is the best way to get in touch with me, learn more about what we're doing for advisors in the tax strategy and compliance work that we do, and also to get access to the various tools and interviews and things that I do, specifically designed to help you improve your practice, improve your own tax situation, etc. So let's get back to the episode, and thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, I see this a lot, and it's definitely a place where, because of my corporate experience, I am like one of the weirdos out there that have this like change management certification. So I think about
Mm,
this all the time,
yeah.
and was really trained in change management strongly when I was inside corporate. So what I'm thinking about it with the team is we want to bring the team as much as we can along for the journey. Now, in some practices, that's more possible than others.
Hmm.
But in an ideal situation, when I'm working with a group, a team, even if there's kind of like a senior advisor and a couple other advisors in the practice, I want to talk with all three of them, probably individually, and
Mm.
understand their unique needs.
Hmm.
So we want to understand what their needs are. We want to make sure that we're solving for as many of those as we can. And we want to bring the team together through the decision making process. What people dislike about change is when they haven't had a say in it and it's impacting their career and their life.
Yeah.
So, especially where you have a junior advisor that you care deeply about, who you anticipate might be taking over your clients one day, you've got to bring him or her along with the journey and give them some say about what they see as important both today and in the future of the practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think for a lot of the firms I see, it's succession planning is always something that's like, oh, we'll get to it. Or like, oh, I got this junior advisor, like that's my succession plan, but there's not really anything that's really formalized. It's kind of because it's not an immediate need right now. But I think for a lot of the firms, when they're going through this whole transition process, that's a really good time to address those needs as well of just, okay, well, where are we actually going? Like, what's the next 5 years going to look like? What's the next 10 years? Like, what's my exit strategy out of this? And so I guess one question I have is when you're talking to people who have a vision for this change, and besides just the fees or the fiduciary part of it, are there other components that you typically see with people who are making this change successfully in terms of like the vision that they have for their practices, or if you could speak to that?
Yeah, I love this question. I see this is where practices really try to differentiate themselves,
Hmm.
and where they also try to create what I call daylight between their old world, perhaps with that broker dealer, whether it be captive or independent, and their
Hmm.
new world as a fiduciary and part of the RIA. So we do, anytime we want to talk with clients about it, I think it's really important to say, here's what I was doing. I loved doing that. It was a great opportunity, but here's what we can do over here in
Hmm.
this new world that is going to drive new client value.
Hmm.
Some of the ways that I'm seeing advisors do that is a focus on a specific element of the client situation. It might be business owners is a great example,
Hmm.
right? I have a client right now who is leaving kind of a captive broker dealer and is going to go RIA. Well, this particular person is a fairly recent SEPA, got her SEPA certification, and wants to provide a lot more business owner services
Hmm.
than what her existing practice is. Her existing practice is very well established. It's great, but it's just not where her passion is as much. She wants to continue to serve that book of business and build on with additional business owner offerings. That's where we're going to create some new differentiation. Another
Hmm.
one's retirement income planning could be something that they're talking about. Just whatever it is that's going to bring you a little bit of daylight and distinction. The other thing people usually get with the RIA move is a little bit of more marketing flexibility. People who are wanting to have a podcast or they want to have a
That's
YouTube show, they want to attract that next generation of clients through those means. They're often falling towards the RIA space today.
Yeah, and it's funny. We've had a number of people on the show talking compliance and talking marketing compliance and those sorts of things, and it really does make a big difference off of the big platforms. You know what the institutions will allow you to do versus like what are the actual rules, and can we, how do we thread the needle without we're not violating anything, but it just gives you a level of nimbleness. And that's something that I've actually seen from a lot of the firms we've talked to that want to go to these models, is that they they want the nimbleness of being able to change their tech stack around as they want. Like we're getting so many new tools so quickly. Like the Kits' tech
Sure.
map this year was crazy. I don't know if you saw that thing,
Yeah.
but so the nimbleness of being able to change things quickly, and especially if you're in a smaller organization where you do have that nimbleness, I've seen it be very attractive for a lot of even, the sub 100 million advisors of just, hey, I want to be able to, run this past my fractional compliance person, and we're going to launch this tool, within the next 2 weeks, versus if you're in the traditional setup set, that can be a really daunting process to do that. But
Absolutely. That's a great point. And then even on the compliance side, we're seeing new compliance tools springing up all the time.
mhm,
I was talking with one RA kind of platform company the other day. They're using Greenboard, which
mhm,
they can send all of their kind of scripts through for, short videos that they're doing, on LinkedIn and on YouTube. They can send it through Greenboard. They basically know immediately that it has no issues flagged. They can record it, post it out, all done, right? Other places, traditional big firms, you might have to submit the video ahead of time, get it, get it returned to you, and then you can post it.
yeah. Yeah, so just those workflows they're getting tighter and tighter, which is so nice. So I guess for advisors who are interested in learning more about the work that you do, Shelby, can you speak a little bit to the process that you take firms through, or just, what's the best way for them to kind of get into your world, if there's any resources or things we should point them to?
Absolutely happy to, and it's a great opportunity. I love working with financial advisors, and it's so fun. I have this really deep need for being in the know as a
Mm,
person. I really have very strong FOMO, so I love getting to talk to as many people as I can all the time. But in terms of how people work with me, I always start with a discovery call, 30 minutes to set up conversation about the blueprints of an advisor's practice and the team's practice. And then from there, talking about what do they think they want to achieve? How do I help them? If we decide to work together, then we schedule a 1 hour discovery call where we walk through all of those functional needs, the financial needs, and those personality needs. And then
mhm,
I go away, go back to my database of firms, do some research if I need to, source some new firms, et cetera. And I bring them back 5 to 10 options. And then we talk through those, why I think they might be fits for them. And then we go
mhm,
through the full due diligence process. One of the things that's a little bit unique about me is because I came to this because advisors were calling me and saying, "Hey, I'm going to move my practice. Where do you think I should take it?" I
Mhm.
didn't know what traditional kind of recruiters, so to speak, did for
Yeah.
advisors. And
Mhm.
so I tend to go a lot further. I tend to be on all the calls. I'm going to do the financial analysis. And then once you've even chosen a firm, I'm working with you all the way through the transition, not on any account stuff, but making sure your marketing strategy and stuff is right. Doing, fractional HR support if that's what you need. I can bring in resources for fractional CFOs, et cetera, connecting them to people like you, Catherine, et cetera. So bringing all those resources to bear so that people really have a good setup when they decide to make a big structural change to their business.
Yeah, you sound like the Mary Poppins of transition work.
Spoken like a true mom to some young children, right? Yes.
Oh, you got all the tricks. Even the fractional CFOs are popping out of the handbag.
That's right. That's right. Whatever people need. I just got it. It's like the big mom purse.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love it. So for people who are interested in connecting with you, we will have Shelby's LinkedIn, and then I'll send her a DM, say hello, and then her website below. And then for those of you who are interested in doing the RIA change and you want to see maybe some of what's administratively involved, on our side, we have an RIA checklist that we use that has some of those things in there. So if you want to see, how many things am I actually going to have to be changing from like the tax and accounting side? It's not comprehensive on the the whole firm side, but on the tax and accounting side, what are the things that I'm really going to have to shift that are going to be painful? So for those of you listening, thanks for joining. Any final thoughts, Shelby, before we sign off?
Just appreciate that you having me on the show. I think it's such a fun experience for people to get to re-envision their business and
Mm,
decide what the future looks like. That is my why, is really how do we get more advisors to a place of thriving. We hear from surveys out there that only like 17% of advisors are thriving. So if you're
mm.
not thriving, like let's have a chat about it and see if we can get you to a place where you are.
Yeah, and it's really, in my experience, it's really not as bad. There's always bumps, but everybody that I've talked to that's gone through the process, who did the full due diligence beforehand, because a lot of people will go through the due diligence process and realize like, oh, actually where I am is good.
Mhm.
For people who go through that process, I've not had anybody go RIA and go back yet. So we'll see.
Yes,
But
same here. Yeah.
yeah, so thanks for joining on the show, Shelby. And for those of you listening, we'll have all those links below. And I want to thank you for joining us on another episode of the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast.